and welcome. This is the story of Green Street and the New Jerusalem Church, presented by Sarah Day. That would be me. I'm very excited to tell this story, so let's get started. Pictures are one of the best ways to tell stories, and today I wish to tell you the story that has something to do with this man. This is Emanuel Swedenborg. He was born on the 29th of January 1688 in Stockholm, Sweden. He is mainly known for his work as a theologian, scientist, philosopher, and mystic. His best-known book is called Heaven and Hell, and he published that in 1758. The reason he's important for us today, though, is he started the Swedenborgianism movement, which is also known as the New Church. He would found this church in 1787. This is the symbol of the New Church. Swedenborgism is based upon Edward Swedenborg's teachings. He wrote over 30 volumes between 1749 and 1771, most of which he published anonymously, but explained his views on the Bible and also religion. Many were also commentaries on various sections of the Bible. Most of his teachings aligned with Protestant and breakaway groups of the time. His beliefs and followership would grow continually throughout his life, but wouldn't really take off until after his death. The religion was first practiced as a formal religion by a group of followers in England. It would later spread to the United States. Today, there are at least 3 different forms or groups that practice Swedenborgism, more commonly now referred to the New Church. They all have the same religion, but slightly different beliefs and practices. It is practiced throughout the world, and by some viewed as a cult-like religion, though that is not how it began. This is an image of the New Jerusalem Church, which is located in Little Bolton, Lancashire, England. This is a photo of the church from the Bolton Journal that was originally published on the 23rd of October, 1886. Swedenborgism goes back in history in Bolton to as early as 1781. It was first practiced in a small building on Berry Street. Mr. Samuel Dawson was the first leader of the church in Bolton. He led until he passed away in 1823. Samuel Crompton was one of the most prominent members of the church. He joined sometime between 1800 and 1803. He is most well known for inventing the spinning mule. He was a businessman and inventor, and thus had more funds available to him than most. He donated a large amount of his money to the church, and this allowed them to build their first permanent building. The first floor of the church was used as a residence place for the leader. Early on, this was Mr. Dawson, but would change hands a couple of times through their future leaders of their congregation, and the second floor was used for services. Mr. Crompton's son, also Mr. Crompton, his first name was George. He was a musician and also had a fair amount of money, and so he paid for an organ to be built and brought to the church. In 1843, they had finally raised enough money to again build a new building. They chose to put this on Higher Bridge Street in Bolton. This is the church you can see in the image. The cornerstone was laid in early 1844. From 1844 until 1863, there was no regular minister or leader at the church. Dr. Wilcox Haddocks often conducted the services, though, and they used a variety of traveling ministers. Reverend William Westall would become minister in 1863, Joseph Dean in 1868, and G.H. Smith in 1874. They would all be the leader within this building. The building continued to be used as a church for many years until the congregations moved or started to fall away. Today, this building is a carpet warehouse. This right here is the carpet warehouse that the building now is. It looks very similar to as it did back in the 1880s when the photo was taken, but the inside has changed quite a bit as it is now a store. This is a map from the National Library of Scotland. They have some quite wonderful historical maps. Higher Bridge Street is the rectangle-like shape on the right-hand side of the screen and runs through a fair amount of Bolton. And the square near the bottom of the map is where the church was built in 1844. This is a little bit of a closer look at Higher Bridge Street and the church. It was luckily placed on a somewhat large field and had many houses close by, which was very nice for the residents of the church. Now, why have I been telling you all of this? Why should I care about Swedenborgism or this tiny church that's now a carpet warehouse on Higher Bridge Street? The reason for me is the woman in this photograph. Her name is Catherine Beswick. She is my ancestor. She was born in Little Bolton, Lancashire, and then would later immigrate to the United States. She married a man named James Houghton in Philadelphia, and they would go on to have 3 sons together. She would then be visited by missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly in slang referred to as Mormons, and would join that church. She would then migrate to Utah with just her sons, as her husband did not believe in the church. As I started to research her and saw what type of woman she was, I wanted to learn more about her past. I found her and her family on the 1841 census and decided I wanted to learn more about where they had lived. After I found the census record, I decided I needed to find her birth record. I had her parents' names and an approximate birth year, and I knew where to look. It took me a while because the New Jerusalem church records were not part of the standard collection of England births from the time. She was actually found in the nonconformist indexed records, which then led me to a wonderful website that has digitized almost all of the Lancashire baptismal, christening, and birth records. This is the page from the New Jerusalem Church. Over the course of 10 years, it only contains maybe 30 entries. But the one that stuck out to me was Catherine's. She's the daughter of James Beswick and Anne. She was born nearly 10 years earlier, but is finally being baptized, and she lived on Green Street. As I continued to look at the page, I saw 2 other children that were very likely her siblings, as they had the exact same parents and were baptized on the same day and lived on the same street, with their father doing the exact same thing. This led me to 2 siblings that I had not previously known existed or had been part of her family. As I continued to look through the entries, I was also able to find another sibling who was baptized about 6 years later. This all made me want to learn more about Green Street, the place at which they lived. Thus, I got back out my maps. I first searched for Green Street just on Google Maps to see if it still exists. It unfortunately does not. I decided that they likely lived somewhere in Little Bolton and started searching the Little Bolton maps to see if I could find a street named Green Street. Thus, I did. Here on the map in the upper left-hand corner is the church, as we saw from our other page, and over on the right-hand side in the bottom right corner is Green Street highlighted. Here is Green Street. You will notice it is not very long and only contains maybe 30 houses. I still do not know which house Catherine grew up and lived in, but I know it was likely one of the ones somewhere along this small, short street. Here is a modern map of Lancashire, England. The cool thing about the National Library of Scotland website is it allows you to toggle between the old map and the modern map. So the exact line here in the bottom of my screen, circling Green Street, is the exact same location as we saw on the previous map. You will notice today that Green Street does not exist. It has been overtaken by a couple of buildings and much larger roads. Thus, I unfortunately cannot go and visit Catherine's former home, but I can know exactly where it is. It is interesting to see how the church and the street changed over time. The church made little steps of progress from meeting in a one-room building on Berry Street all the way to having their own large building. It then eventually, today, becomes a carpet warehouse. It's also interesting to see the evolution of Green Street, the place where my ancestor and her family members and friends likely played and hung out together and lived life, no longer exists. Even one building now takes up 4 or 5 of her houses, and the main freeway goes right through her small street. Thank you for joining me and listening to this presentation about Green Street and the New Jerusalem Church. I hope you enjoyed learning about this little piece of history and how finding where your ancestor lived may make the ancestor's life more meaningful. Thank you for watching and continue enjoying your All About That Place videos over the next few days.